Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we find ourselves in the year 850 AD. We are royal architects competing to impress our king and maintain our noble status by constructing various landmarks throughout this newly appointed domain. Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game for 1 to 5 players, plays in 60 to 80 minutes, for ages 12 and up, and is published by Renegade Game Studios. Today we'll be doing a rule school where I'll show you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Without further ado, let's get started. Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game for 1 to 5 players where each of you will be royal architects trying to impress your king. You'll be placing workers all over the kingdom to give you different benefits, like going to the forest to get wood, or silver, stone, clay, or gold, and the more workers you place, the more interesting things happen. You'll also be hiring apprentices which give you different abilities, some resources, and the ability to craft cool buildings. Because to craft buildings, you'll be using some of those architects and resources to gain you points, abilities, and possible endgame points as well. You can also cut corners going to the black market to get lots of great resources, but you lose points in the end by going down a virtue track and you risk going to prison. And other players can actually capture some of your workers and send them to prison, where they make money for doing so. You'll also be spending resources to work on a cathedral, which will move you up a point track for the end of the game and get you some great rewards. There's also an advanced game where each player has some asymmetric powers and starting resources, and there's also a solo game. To set up, first take the board, put it in the middle of the table. Next, in the bottom left-hand side of the board, you'll see the black market. There's a spot for cards. The left side is the small market. You're going to find the cards that match these. You're going to shuffle them up. You're going to place them right here. You know that they're on the right side because the artwork actually matches here, versus if this was flipped over, you could see it matches what's here. And the big market cards always have 4 resources, where the small market has 1 or 2. Shuffle them up and place them like that. Next, in the middle top of the board, you'll find the cathedral. There's a space for cards there. You're going to place cards that look like this face down. These are reward cards. Now, the amount that you put here is going to be the number of players times 2. So 2 per player plus 1. So what that means is, with, say, for a 4-player game, that would be a total of 9. 2 times the amount of players is 8, and just plus 1 is 9. So it's always the number of players times 2 plus 1. All the rest of the cards that you're not using can be placed back in the box. Next, just to the right off the top side of the board, you'll see the Guardhouse. Off there, you're going to place all the debt cards, just like this, unpaid side down. It looks just like this. They don't have to be shuffled because all the cards are the same, but make sure they look just like that. You'll then find these multiplier cards. They have times 5 on one side and times 10 on the other. Place them down just like this below the debt cards. The multiplier cards are just there to help you in case you run out of resources from the supply. On the bottom right-hand side of the board, you're going to find all these blue-backed apprentice cards. You're going to shuffle them up, place them next to the board, and you're going to deal out 8 face-up apprentice cards in the slots shown. Then, in the bottom of the board, right in the middle, you'll see the workshop. Just to the left of that, you're going to shuffle up all of the green cards, which are the building cards, and place them in that stack right there. Next, set aside all the resources in a supply. We have wood, marble, stone, clay, gold, and a form of currency, which is going to be silver. You'll take 4 of those silver coins and you'll place them just above the tax stand in that box. This is on the left side of the board. Now, before players select their player board, first remove the one that has a gray background on both sides. It says Helena on one side and Constantine on the other. This is used in a variant of the game, so you can put this back in the box for now. Each player can select the color of the player board and the character that they want to play. Make sure you're using the color side for your first game. These are double-sided, and all of them have a gray side on the back, and this is used for an advanced game where each player has some asymmetric things about them. So for your first game, I recommend that everyone play with the color side up like this. Any boards not being used can be placed back in the box. Once selected, each player will take all of the workers of that color and 2 of their player markers. Each player will take 1 of their player markers and place them just below the last bottom level of the cathedral. And then on the left side of the board, each player is going to take their last player marker and place it on the number 7 of the virtue track. Next, deal each player 4 of these green building cards. Each player is then going to secretly look at these cards. They're going to select one and put it face down in front of them. That means that they have 3 left. They're going to pass these clockwise to the player to their left, which means you're going to get, from your right, 3 from the player over there. You're going to then secretly look at these, select one more of those, and place it face down in front of you, which means you'll have 2 cards left. You'll pass these to your left, which means you'll be getting 2 from your right, and then you're going to look at these 2 secretly and select one of them. This means everybody will have 3 cards there at the end of this. Now everyone will still have 1 left over, and you'll be placing these at the bottom of the card deck where you got these building cards. Next, randomly assign a start player. Give that player 3 silver. Then going clockwise, each player gets 1 more silver than the player to their right. So first player gets 3, the next player to their left will get 4, and so on and so on and so on. The object of the game is to have the most points at the end, and you'll mostly be doing that by spending resources to construct buildings for points, and some of them you'll even need some help from some apprentices. And you'll also be gaining points by working on the Cathedral. And different things throughout the game will affect virtue, which will also affect your points positively or negatively. The game is played in clockwise fashion, with each player placing one of their workers out on the board, and you continue in this fashion throughout the game. When placing workers, you'll notice the majority of the spots on the board have these large open circles like this. This is where you'll place them to immediately gain benefits. These 4 spots are the main spots to gather resources. For example, if you place a worker here in the forest, you'll get 1 wood per worker of yours that's here. So if it's your first one, you'll get 1 wood from the supply and place it in front of you. Now you're only placing 1 worker on your turn, but on a subsequent turn, if you placed another one here, because there's 2, you'd get 2 wood. So it's always 1 per the amount that's there. But as I mentioned, these open circles mean any amount of workers from any amount of players can go there. So if the blue player places one here, they'll just get 1 wood because there's only 1 of their workers there. The Silversmith is where you can get money. Let's say the green player already had 1 worker there. They placed their second worker there. They'll get 1 silver plus another silver for each person there. There's 2 people there, so that would be 2 plus the 1 you get for going there, a total of 3 silver that they take from the supply, which you set up off the side of the board at the beginning of the game. The Quarry gives you 1 stone for each of your workers there. The Mines gives you 2 options. The first time you place a worker, you must take the clay plus 1 for every worker there. So the first time you go there, you'll get 2 clay. However, the second time you go there, you now have 2 workers. Instead of doing that, you can take 1 gold per every 2 of your workers that are there. Now you have options. You can go to the workshop and you have 2 options. The first one is to get an apprentice that you see here. And here we see we have to pay 4 silver. Anytime you see red silver like this, it means you pay those 2 as taxes. Anytime you see the normally colored silver, those get paid to the supply. So here we'll pay a total of 4 silver. And since 2 of those were red, 2 of them would pay as taxes, and you'd put them in the tax stand on the left side of the board. The other 2 that you pay would go off the board to the supply. Now by default, the apprentices that you could possibly hire depend on how many workers you have here. If you have just 1, you can hire either of these 2 because this shows 1 worker. If you had placed your second worker when doing this, you could hire any of the apprentices up to where you see the second worker, and so on and so forth with 3 and 4. However, let's say we do just have these 2 workers, but we want to hire this one or this one. We would normally need 3 workers, but there is a way to get them. You can spend silver to skip a column. For example, if I paid a silver here, this allows me to skip this column. I have 2 workers. It allows me now to be able to get this column. If I wanted one of the apprentices in this column, I could then spend another silver here, and now I could get this one because these 2 columns are skipped and I have 2 workers. So that's a way to pay money in order to get them. So let's say we spent this and we got this apprentice. Anytime an apprentice has been gotten from the board, the ones to the right all slide down, and then you draw 1 off the top of the deck to replace any open spots. Now the apprentices also give you a benefit at the bottom. Many of those have to do with other specific action spots on the board or specific events. They can also have an immediate effect that will raise or lower virtue. To see all of these, there is an appendix book that you can look at to see all of these abilities do. And each apprentice has an icon on the upper left, and these are going to be important when you see which apprentices you may need to craft buildings that we'll go over later. Also keep in mind that some apprentices may have multiple silver on them, and if you do hire any apprentice with silver on them, you take them all and add them to your supply as well as that apprentice. The other option on the workshop is to gain these building plans. Now, you'll take 1 plus 1 for every 2 workers you have here. So if I place my second worker here, I would actually get 2. 1 card for just going there, and another card because I have 2 workers there. So you take 2 off the top, and you would keep these. However, keep in mind you have a maximum hand limit of 6 for the building cards. If you ever have more than 6, you must discard down, and if you do discard, you place them face down underneath that building supply deck. The town center allows you to capture groups of workers. Let's say the blue player places here, it's their second worker. One of those workers and a silver that they would pay, and since this is red, it goes to the tax stand on the left side of the board over here. That allows them to capture any one group of workers, and a group of workers is all the workers from one spot that is of the same color, or the same player if you will. But you can only capture from those spots that have the big open circles that we've already been showing you. So let's say it wants to capture these purple ones. They'll take those workers off, and they'd place them in the captured section on their player board. Later on, they'll be able to send these to prison and gain some silver. We'll show you that in just a little bit. Now, if you're playing with 4 or more players, you only get to do this at one location. If you're playing with less than 4 players, meaning a 2 or 3 player game, you actually can do this from 2 different locations. We're playing with 4 players and we only did 1. Now, if you have an additional worker, which we do, because one of them gave us this, an additional one gave us this, we can spend another silver, this time to the supply because it's not red. We could then do an additional capture. You can capture your own workers as well, even the ones that you just placed. So we can capture our own workers right off the town center. And assuming that they're your own, you place them into your supply. This is one way to gain some of your workers back off the board. So speaking of that prison, let's talk about the guardhouse. By placing a worker here, you have many options, and you get one of these actions per worker. So here, you can get 1 silver for every captured person on your board that you place into this prison. So that blue player could take all of these and place them right there into prison, gaining 1 silver from the supply for each of those. Or instead of doing that, by placing here, they could have taken all of their own units from prison back into their supply. Or let's assume that the purple player actually had some of these blue player workers captured already. And so this worker's action could be to either pay 5 silver, 2 of those going to tax, as shown as here as red, or they could take one of these debt cards. That's what that little slash means. These debt cards are bad for you. They're worth -2 points at the end, shown here at the end of the game. So you can either pay the silver or take the debt card. If you choose to take the debt card, you'll also lose 1 virtue, and then you're going to release all of your captured workers from all player boards. You'll get those back and put them in your own supply, but let's talk about now what this virtue is. Now losing virtue means you go down the virtue track 1, and at the end of the game, where you are on the virtue track might give you negative points or positive points as you go down or up it at the end of the game. Those will be assigned. There's also different things that will hinder what you can do in the game, or things that actually make it better for you, but we'll go over that a little bit more at the end of the game. And the last possibility when placing this 1 worker is paying 6 silver, 3 of them to tax, 2, turn over one of those debt cards and pay it. As you can see here, it'd be worth -2 at the end, but you could pay it off, which essentially gives you 1 virtue. And again, 1 virtue gained as you go up on the virtue track. Now, if you go to the tax stand, first of all, you would lose 2 virtue. So this green player would lose 2 virtue, but they get to take all of the silver that's in the tax stand. Now, you cannot go here if there is no silver, because as soon as someone takes this, there's none here until someone has to pay tax. No one else can go to the tax stand. Now, when going to the King's Storehouse, for each of your workers, you can take either one of these actions, and you can repeat them if you have more workers to do so. Here, you take any one of these 3 resources, any 2 of these, and you spend them and put them to the supply, and you gain a virtue. Or you can spend any 3 of combination of these 2, stone and or wood, to get you 1 marble resource. Now, there are some apprentices that actually have some things about King's Storehouse. Right here, you could give 2 wood to get a marble. So things that can help you out like that. Up until this point, we've talked about these large open circles, which means any amount of workers from any amount of players can go there. In the black market, this is a way that players can take sort of shortcuts, and each of these spots can only hold 1 worker. So if a worker goes here, they spend a silver, and they lose 1 virtue, but whatever this card says, they can get. So in this case, they're going to get a marble and a stone. A player could go here to spend 2 silver to the supply and lose 1 virtue to either hire any apprentice on the board, or draw 5 of the building plans, keep 1 of them, and put the rest of them at the bottom of this face down. In the 3rd spot here, you'd pay 3 silver, lose a virtue, and you'd get the resources that are here. Now you see this, it shows you 3 workers, and it shows a little reset. This means that anytime the black market is full, the black market will reset. Now when you have a black market reset, any and all workers that are in the black market get put directly into prison. And the small market card gets flipped over like this. And so now this is different, and this is different. And if there's no more cards here to flip over to the large market, you take all these cards, shuffle them up, and create another small market. then anyone that actually owns an apprentice that has a black market reset action can take it. For example, if you have the gatekeeper, during a black market reset, you can release 2 of your people from prison. Also, as shown here with that reset black market logo, anybody that has 3 or more of their own workers in prison lose a virtue. And the player that has the most takes one of these debt cards. Now, going to the Guildhall is how you either complete a building or work on the cathedral. Now, to do this, you actually put your worker laying down like this, as in the outline here. Now, notice that you'll start filling these in from the top row, going from left to right. And if you're playing with less than 3 players, you'd stop here, but you go to the right as far as you can, depending on the amount of players that are there. So for instance, if you were playing with 3 players, you'd stop here and start at the next row, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we're playing a 4-player game, so it stopped at the 4+ and started a new row. Anytime you place a worker on any of these Guildhall spaces that has that black market reset, that's another time that the black market reset happens that we've already talked about. So let's first talk about what happens. When you place one here, you can do either of these 2 things, crafting a building or working on the cathedral. Let's first talk about the building. In this case, the well. If you have 2 wood and 2 stone to spend, you'd take this and spend it to the supply. This is going to be worth 3 points at the end of the game. Some of the buildings have some immediate things that happen. In this case, you would get 4 clay from the supply. These buildings stay face up in front of you because you'll be adding up these points at the end of the game. Now, some buildings require resources like normal, like 2 clay, 4 wood, and a gold, but they also sometimes will require an apprentice, maybe more than 1. In this case, it has to have an apprentice that they have hired in order to also do this. This will be worth 7 points at the end, and some of the cards give you end game possibilities. Like this one, at the end, if the player who created the wood market has the most wood, not including ties, they'd gain 2 more points. And some big buildings like a university require a lot of resources, and they might even require all 3 of the apprentice types for huge points. And they can even give you both immediate benefits like gaining a virtue and endgame possibilities if you don't have any debt cards, 2 more points. And keep in mind that apprentices are never discarded when they're used to craft buildings. Now, when going to the Guildhall, instead of crafting a building like we just saw, you can work on the cathedral, which is right here. Now, everyone starts with their marker at the very bottom of here, and you always pay resources to the line above it that you'll be jumping to. So here you have to pay a gold, and you must discard a building plan card, the green one, from your hand, put it to the bottom of the pile, and then you can move up here. Now, when you do that, you're going to get a reward card, and at the end of the game, if this is where you're at, you'll score that many points. Now, these reward cards do different things. You only take 1, but I'm showing you a few here. They give you different mixes of good things like virtue and building cards and silver and things like that. Once you take the reward immediately, you then discard this card out of the game. If the deck is ever empty and someone moves up, they simply just get 1 virtue. Now, there's 2 spots here that have stone or wood, and ×4 and ×8. It's any 8 combination of those, any 4 combination of those. By the way, you can actually be blocked as well. This green player cannot move up until one of these 2 players move up because they're being blocked. Now, at some point, the Guildhall is going to get completely full. 4-player game, that would be full. So every player, including the player that just placed this, would get 1 more turn. Now, at the end of the game, each player is going to get negative or positive points, possibly, depending on where they are on the virtue track. Then you'll count the points in the upper right of all the buildings that you have completed, and remembering that some buildings might have some end game points that you might be able to get as well. Any debt not paid is -2 points. Gold and or marble are worth 1 point each, and you'll get 1 point for every 10 silver that you have. You'll also get -1 point for every 2 workers that you have in prison. Whoever has the most points is the winner, and if it's tied, the player with the most virtue, meaning the one highest on that virtue track, is the winner. If it's still tied, it'll be among those tied that have the most silver, and if it's still tied between them, they share the victory. And keep in mind that all of the scoring is on the bottom of the player aid. Now let's talk a little bit more about the actions that happen on this virtue track. If you ever drop to 4 or below, you cannot work on the cathedral anymore. However, if you're able to go past up it, you can now work on the cathedral again. If your virtue goes down low enough, here you can skip 1 tax anytime you have to pay it. Down here you can skip up to 2 taxes anytime you're supposed to pay it. If a player goes all the way to the bottom, every virtue they'd lose after that, they would gain an unpaid debt card. On the positive side of the virtue track, if you're at 10 or above, you no longer can go to the black market. And if you're at the top of the track, every virtue you gain after that, you can pay any debts that were unpaid. This means sending it back to the debt card pile. In the appendix book, there are rules for solo play and for playing 2-player versus a bot. That's going to be outside the scope of this video, but go ahead and look at page 6 and 7 in the appendix rulebook. Now for the advanced game, you'd flip the player aid over to the dark gray side, and it would give you some starting information, like how many workers are in prison for you, how much silver, where you're on the virtue track, you get a building craft card, and you have a gold, plus a special ability, like in this case, she always ignores one tax throughout the game. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Architects of the West Kingdom and get to the fun quicker than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have any further questions about the rules, I've placed a link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them because not only will I be notified, but so will Renegade Game Studios. This has been the Game Boy Geek, helping you find and enjoy the next board game you'll love.